Hey everybody, welcome to eChannelNews. We've got Derek Manky. He's a chief security strategist and global VP of threat intelligence at Fortinet. And there's an Olympic coming up pretty soon, and we've got some intel that maybe we should all learn about. So, Derek, first of all, welcome. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing really well. Thanks, Julian. How are you?
Very, very good, man.
Good.
So, what? Let's just start it off. Let's go down the laundry list of things that could possibly go wrong with the Olympics. But what's your overall take on what's going to happen or what could happen over the next while?
So my overall take is, we've been here before, of course. This is not the first Olympic Games. So we have seen history and history repeat itself before. But, in a 4-year gap, three to 4 year gap, there's a lot of developments that continue to happen on the threat landscape. And so, I think that really elevates the level of risk even further for this Olympics compared to other ones that we've seen in the past. It's that proverbial snowball that's been
Mm.
rolling. And I describe this as a potpourri, right? Of all these different things coming in one. High traffic world stage event equals cash to cyber criminals, of course, but it's not just cyber criminals. Usually when we look at certain targets, you're dealing with one flavor or the other, either just cyber criminals or nation state activists like hacktivism and so forth, critical infrastructure attacks. We're up against both here, essentially, right? And we've seen already indications of that happening through our 40 Recon and Dark Web team monitoring, actually what these groups are talking about, what their targets are, what they're trying to sell and monetize as well.
Yikes. Okay, so the difference here, though, Derek, 4 years ago, not everybody had their hands or their paws on artificial intelligence, right? And
Yep.
now those mediocre, wannabe sort of cyber attackers got a bit of boost, a little bit. They're emboldened, they're feeling
Yeah.
they can take on the world, right? So let's walk this through. What did your findings bring out? Let's start at 1, 2, 3, and work our way down this list, my friend.
Sure. So first of all, we are seeing targets to organizations regionally. Why? Because those targets can be very valuable for doing further campaigns, social engineering campaigns for phishing, for further distribute malware and use attacks to steal credentials and then sell those credentials in a business model to other would-be attackers. So if we just look at the increase in activity, we went from about 80 to 90%. So it's been consistent. It was an 80% increase in the second half of 2023, Q1, and a 90% increase. So the increase in those targeted organizations on the dark web. So we're talking about, again, threat actors that are selling information about these targets. So they're called combo lists. So usernames, passwords, PII associated with these organizations. It's been a big surge. So that's number one, just direct targets. On the other side, we've seen groups, well-known groups like LulzSec that are actively advertising that they intend to disrupt and attack the games, right? So they're not your
They're not
traditional.
shy.
They're not shy, no. And so again, we don't want to treat these with a grain of salt because in the past, if you look at the 2018 games in Pyeongchang, we saw Olympic Destroyer, which was a very significant threat, a wiper threat that can actually impact the infrastructure. So those are, again, those two sides, but already we're seeing activity on that. PII, so it's critical mass with that. So this is again sale of VPN credentials, stolen credentials, phishing kits as well. This is a crime as a service. So again, we
Mm.
see this across the boards, but it's super concentrated in these global high traffic events like the Olympics. So we've seen custom phishing kits being offered as a service. So it lowers the entry barrier. Yes, they are using machine learning and artificial intelligence models to be able to make those kits better and do social engineering better and with phishing kits specifically. So again, that's what we've seen. And then there's also what do we anticipate, right? Things absolutely that are relevant to the games. So infrastructure, if you think about how critical this infrastructure is, it's the operation of the
It's
games.
huge.
Yeah. those are targets. We see this now with the ransomware model, where
Mm.
it's from data encryption to service disruption, right? We see that with manufacturing as an example, operational technology, the Olympics, with broadcast and all of that happening with the athletes. That's a very big target, and they have the malware, the ransomware payload already developed to do that. And then there's the scams, right? So
Mm.
consumer travelers, we see this all the time. We've seen this in Olympics past, where they're also susceptible to attacks connecting to rogue Wi-Fi access points in the network. Ticket scams, we've seen these a lot before.
Oh,
So typo squatted domains, right?
that's the
Posing.
obvious one, isn't it?
It is, yeah, but it's the obvious and easy one for
Yeah.
attackers that we see
That's low
coming
hanging
in.
fruit. Hey, so a couple of things. I mean, look, the whole Olympic Games is based upon competition, timing,
Yeah,
clocks, that equipment, and of course, man. I mean, if someone messes with that equipment, wrong people will get those medals, right? Are we worried about that impact, that level of impact?
I, I I would say never, right? We haven't seen that in the past. It's always a
Okay.
possible. More likely scenarios are indirect. So you talk about like timers and clocks and things like that to actually hone in and target that. It takes quite a bit of planning and sophistication and work, and I just don't want to be the doomsday
Yeah,
scenario.
me neither, man. I'm sorry I brought it up, but I'm just
I don't know, but
looking at the worst case.
but it could happen, and I'll tell you how, right? The most likelihood scenario of that happening would be the IT to OT hop. So I mean, we've seen this with Colonial Pipeline in the past, where IT networks directly get impacted, likely through a ransom attack. Because we've seen these before. Um, those IT networks are converged and connected with those operational technology networks like timing clocks and so forth, right? So if there is
Mhm.
an impact on one, the other can go down. At the end of the day, cyber criminals are just going to try to demand as a large ransom payment. That's what they do. And if they can put their eggs into one basket and hit one thing that's going to have sort of a collateral damage effect, that's what they're going to do, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, we got the folks that just want to get money, all right, and those ones we could kind of guess, where they're going to follow the bucks, right? But then we got the real crazies, right? Those terrorist type folks and the people who want a disruption. They just want to make a statement, right?
Yep.
And they're not looking at. They just want disruption. Period. Right? Um, what is everybody doing to sort of like harden that community?
Yeah. So, because of this overarching threat that we're seeing, you called it a laundry list earlier. I mean, it's a multifaceted approach, let's say that, right? So,
Mm,
first of all, the obvious one is shoring up resilience to these networks using machine learning and artificial intelligence and security fabric to be able to just harden the networks using threat intelligence and security operations. That's a big and even a bigger focus that's evolved over the years, right? So there's preparedness on that end, creating playbooks, right? So not just waiting for something and then devising a plan, but having a readiness playbook in place for these scenarios and attacks. So these are, what we call playbooks, but they're
mm,
effectively, you know, simulations and exercises to run through before, the event actually happens. So the
mm,
preparedness angle. We talk about training and education a lot. That's a big piece of this as well too, just understanding what these threats are, how to respond to them. So there's a big aspect on that
mm,
for not just the security analysts and folks, but also for the end users, awareness campaigns, right? Because again, a lot of these attacks are just are the cyber criminals trying to make a quick buck.
mm,
That's the volume we see. So that's the most likely interaction end users are going to have. So again, it's the things we talk about being able to understand the ticketing scams, what these latest phishing campaigns for the Olympics look like, because we find those daily,
mm,
with our labs. So that's a big piece. Multi-factor authentication, right? That's an obvious one when it comes to connecting to networks using SASE. Uh, at the very least VPNs for secure
mm.
access. but SASE as well is a big piece because a lot of employees from organizations are going to be traveling to the games. They might be using work laptops,
Yep.
and there's a significant threat
Man, they're
there,
gonna be
right?
working while they see the games. There's some games that's not quite, exciting. So during those times, I'm pretty sure, they're gonna be plugging into their systems, right? And the
Yeah,
Wi-Fi you're gonna be using there, I mean, those are the obvious attack points, right? Is it VPNs only? Is it like if you're traveling and you're connected to your business, right? What's the absolute advice that you would give those people to kind of like keep themselves a bit safe?
absolutely. So if you are on definitely a work workstation or like work environment,
Yeah.
like a laptop. Yes, at the very least, you want VPN and multi-factor authentication, at the very least. But for a more robust solution, look towards SASE because then you have application level security. You have it's really a gambit of all of that going through a local point of presence. So that's another piece to it. But yeah, you don't want to go in without any of that protection because again, this is a very um, a
Yeah.
very active environment, right? When you go there. The other
That's the
thing
worst
is,
place, man, to be going to do some work, first of all. So leave the laptop home if you can, right? But
yeah,
yeah, people are going to do it, right? And people are going to receive those emails. So yeah, I mean, I would say that's the thing that's going to have that post Olympic fallout, right?
yeah,
Well, who knows where that's going to go, right? Let's carry on,
yeah.
man.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I talked about this when we first started chatting, but the EASM, so External Attack Surface Management, this is an easy one that you don't have to be a security expert yourself, and this is what we do in FortiGuard Labs. But it's having eyes on understanding these attackers and what they're doing, so you can get alerted. It's the proactive piece again too. So there's ways that you can have alerts when one of those cyber criminals is trying to target your organization and they're talking about it on Telegram or they're talking about it on the dark web,
Mm,
or when they're maybe they have done a breach and you're not aware of it, and they're selling these combo lists and stolen credentials. So we have that through FortiRecon, but again, it's that we call it shifting left in the
mm,
kill chain, more
okay.
prepared and waiting. You have to do both elements of security, but the proactive measures go a long way with that. Yeah.
You mean it's kind of obvious, but for those people out there, if you can advise your customers, right? It's not just the attack while you're at the Olympic venue, right? It's when you go back to the hotel, and the
Yep.
cafe you're going to be eating from, right? I mean, it's not just that perimeter, right? I mean, it's literally while you're there in that geography, right? Assume that things are not as cool as it should be, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The perimeter is dead, we've said for a while now, right? It's the edge, and
Yeah.
that edge is moving. Especially in this environment. I think that advice applies anywhere, because attacks can happen from anywhere, but especially, during an event like this in that region as well, too. It's just an
Mm.
elevated level of risk.
What do you think about so a lot of people are getting hit now with text spamming, right?
Yep.
And little things like, hey man, the venue changed, you know, click here to enter a contest in the swimming competition, whatever. I don't know. I'm just making stuff
Yep.
up here, right? But you're going to
Yep.
get some weird text that because you're in that Olympic mental sphere, right?
Yep.
You're now like thinking that maybe that could be real, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out SMS or just text messaging because that is another relevant threat we've seen before, and it's unfortunately something that traditionally is not as protected, right? So you're talking
Mm,
about mobile endpoints now beyond laptops. So is there security inspection on those mobile endpoints? A lot of them are just again hacking humans or the social engineering, asking for phishing attacks, asking for credentials that they can then steal through that SMS message and sell, like I was talking about on the dark web. So those are very real. It's from a cyber crime perspective, we see this time and time again where attackers set up farms, like they're actually farms plugging in SIM cards, doing IEMI hijacking, so spoofing, man-in-the-middle attacks, looking
Mm.
for those two-factor authentication credentials. But keep in mind, every single one of those requires interaction with the end user, right? So it goes back to that. I think in that
Yeah.
aspect, education is critical there, right? Because it just takes a second to pause, to look at this. Maybe it looks like a funky domain, or it's typo squatted, or something's not right about this. And obviously the unsolicited nature of it for, asking for
Mm.
any information.
Yeah.
So the other obvious one, I'll just point it out, but we've seen this, is anything really that involves cryptocurrency transactions, because that's what
Mm.
attackers like to use too, right?
Man, look, I mean, the old saying, you see something, say something, right? So we got this physical threat, right, from the usual crazy nut jobs out there, right?
Mhm.
So I think there's 100,000, police and military in the middle of Paris right now. So I think it's going to be pretty safe from a physical perspective. But then you've got this the cyber thing where they don't even really need to be there, right? So it's like, man, it was like it used to be where we could protect people physically. Now we've got to protect them virtually. What does that cybersecurity, operating system look like? Do you have a sense of what's going on in Paris right now?
Yeah, that's robust, of course. But it's interesting because when you talk about the physical and virtual security, there is I mean, we call it sci-fi, like cyber physical.
Yeah.
It's happening more. Those lines are getting blurred more and more and more. And again, a big reason of that is the operational technology. That's why in our labs and in our threat landscape report, the last one we released, we talk about OT being the number one target for ransomware and just the number one target overall, because it sits in the middle, right? I mean, these are
Mm,
things you talked about the timer example. Okay, that's not a physical security issue.
mm,
But things like security cameras absolutely are and
yeah.
can be. All those go down. Now you have a direct impact to physical security, right? That's what that operating environment looks like, because it's no longer just firewalls at the edge. Now you have to protect these other edge devices, right? Sorry, at the data center. You have to protect these other edge devices now, like those security cameras, all those other things that have an IP address and are plugged in. So in essence, the security operations center, even with the physical security, has a cyber element to it now. It has to, right?
It's almost mind-boggling, man. It's almost impossible to achieve, but it's actually fascinating that the good folks, right, is able to like mass this protection to make something as crazily big as the Olympics and other activities, right, like the Super Bowl and whatever, right, that goes off without a hitch, right? And it's quite interesting how people step up, to the challenge. Um, any comments and the people like yourselves, my friend, who are trying to figure out what could happen and how to
Well,
give people some advice?
yeah, so some advice. First of all, I always like to say, I mean, everything we talk about sounds crazy, like you said, and daunting. The reality is a lot of the volume and successful attacks can be easily mitigated, right? We're not talking about new 0 days always that are being used. Like
Yeah.
again, going back to the training, the social engineering, if everybody has their role and part and is up to speed on that, that's a really good thing we can do to mitigate most of the risk, right? So that's the good news on that end. The other thing is that as the games unfold, of course, keep up to date on everything. We have our security blog at blog.fortinet.com. We have a threat research blog on there. There's always new developments happening again that you just should be aware of. Yeah, the other thing is there's a lot of managed services technology out front. We're going back to security
Mm.
out there today that that also help a lot with that. Again, technologies that on the good side use machine learning and artificial intelligence to reduce the mean time to detect and mean time to respond to these threats. That can also, and it does mitigate most of the risk. In fact, if you have a full stack like that,
Mm,
it's it's very hard, very difficult for the attacker, and likely they're going to go somewhere else, right?
mm.
So
Yeah,
if you
don't be
repeat
easy
that,
prey, right?
yeah, yeah. But the goal is to take away as much easy prey as we can too, right?
For
To
sure.
find that. That's
Yeah,
why I always talk about this as an ecosystem, right?
without a doubt. And another thing too, I would just throw out there as a caution, just from my my being in this cybersecurity world and seeing it from so many different angles, that even when you're back home living, sitting on your couch watching the Olympics, and you might have friends or somebody who went there, you're going to receive maybe information. It could be like, hey, here I'm having some fun, and here's this person won, and it might look like a legit thing. And so don't believe that if you're not physically there, right, that you could also not be taken, because the information is coming to you too as well, right?
Yeah, and MDM is another one. Sorry, you mentioned information, misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. Those are also attacks we expect to see. Yeah, and going to this sitting on the couch in the living room example, I'm glad you mentioned that too. It's something I talk about all the time. There is a disconnect in the human mind, right? We have a primal instinct to be able to respond to physical threats, but
Mm.
not on the television, not virtually, not on the internet. So it's disconnected. We're not trained to do that. That's what I mean about the training, right? We literally have to reprogram ourselves that way.
It is a complex world, but welcome to welcome to the world we're living in. It ain't going away, so live with it or figure it out, man. But I just want to get your last opinion on the dark web. I mean, obviously you've been surfing around, swimming around in that pool down there. What is it looking like? What's going on?
Yeah, it's an interesting space, of course, right? These are marketplaces for mostly cybercrime, but other actors as well too, where it's invite only. So you basically have to earn your way up into the ranks, get into forums. There are services, a growing array of services offered. So we call it CAAS, or crime as a service. So it started actually like, you know, around 2010, I would say, with
Mm.
basic ones like phishing as a service and DDoS as a service. And then, of course, ransom as a service, which is one of the most prolific ones that we see today, where they pay, sign up people to these through dark web to these affiliate models and pay commission based off of ransom payments. That's been going on for a while, and that's prolific. But now you have these new ones as well, using things like machine learning. We talked about this in our predictions, and they're just starting to unfold, where it's like reconnaissance as a service, right? So being able to
Mm.
understand about a PI, this is what we're seeing with the Olympics, PII being offered for sale. That's part of this, right? And deep fakes would be another one. All these new sort of modern, tools that can be used for attacks. But I would say the most prominent in the last 2 year new one that we see on dark web is initial access brokers, IAVs. So it's just a different business model. Again, these attackers who have been attacking for years and getting into systems for years, they're trying to be smarter business wise. So what they've done now is they've just focused their time and energy on uh, compromising a system, and that's
Mm.
it. So they don't do the full ransom, right? They'll just compromise the system. When they have that, then they take it to dark web and they sell access to buyers to that system. That's the new business model. It's easier for them. It's a shorter cycle. They hold auction processes. Yeah, auctions with usually starting at about half a Bitcoin for access into these environments.
Wow.
It's something we see quite regularly. Yeah,
Why go the last mile where you can make money just up until the last mile, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Interesting stuff. So, to kind of wrap this up here, my friend, how do you summarize all this crazy things? I mean, for me, I just felt like 4 years ago was a bit of a rehearsal for this 4 years now. And this 4 years is going to be another rehearsal for the next 4 years, which is probably going to be 10x insane. I hope by then we figured more things out, how to help AI leverage this. What's your take overall now? Like, how should we as businesses and customers and people, like, how do we go to these Olympics? How do we remain safe? What's your 1, 2, 3 advice for everybody?
Keep it simple, right? You know, look at the top easy mitigation strategies. We talked about it from VPN and MFA as a, you know, basic all the way up to SASE, like, so full enterprise security going into these environments. Definitely, you know, from a event organization perspective, right? We're talking about data center and operations. Um, Absolutely leverage AI and machine learning, not just as a buzzword bingo, but something that's actually practical, because it's honestly required nowadays with threat intelligence to be able to detect and find these threats and respond to it. We can't just throw bodies at the problem,
Mm,
but there are a lot of, you know, valid solutions with SOC, so Security Operations Center, and integrations with that. Yeah. And then, as I said, I wouldn't panic, first of all, right? That's the
yeah.
advice. It does sound daunting. But again, taking some of these steps really does mitigate majority of the risk. That's what the game of cybersecurity is all about, right?
Mm,
Um, you can never eliminate the threat, just like physical crime. You need to mitigate risk as much as possible. And so it's by taking a couple of those steps for employees, education on employees, and then having, you know, security inspection and solutions on the threat go a long way. And then also on the proactive end, that's my last piece of advice. I would say look at tabletop exercises, just things that you can be prepared for, these what if scenarios, playbooks, right? It's a
mm.
good example of that. Yeah.
At the end of the day, man, nothing is going to stop people from going to events like the Olympics and et cetera, et
Oh,
cetera. The bad
yeah.
guys can try to do what they want to do, but it is whatever it is. They may succeed some ways, right? Mostly they'll fail generally. Things like what happened last week with, you know, one vendor that you know, was a mistake that caused a lot of collapse. That worries me even now more than, you know, what could happen, because the impact of that would be, you know, crazy, right, for an event. But
Mm.
you know, be diligent, right? Keep an eye out what's going on. Don't click on stuff. If you can, leave the computers at home, turn it off, right, and just enjoy the games. And I'll leave you with the last word, man. What do you want everybody to know?
Again, don't don't panic, stay safe, follow some simple measures, keep up to date. You just have to cultivate you have to cultivate a culture of cybersecurity. So it shouldn't be just something you're thinking about once a year when the Olympics come up, right? So as these games unfold, keep reading about latest security developments. If you're an organization, you know, push that messaging to employees to be aware about these attacks. Just have that in your frame of mind every day, especially when traveling, right? The rogue access points, all of that. And yeah, you can check out everything that we're following on our security blog. So blog.fortinet.com.
There you go. All right, man. Derek, thanks for bringing this timely information to everybody out there. It's kind of strange that, you know, you're going to an event, you know, and you've got to prepare, you know, for cyber attacks as well. But hey, that's the way we are today. Thanks, Derek. Cheers.
All right, take care.